Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Vicky Jelly and I'm the Mayor of Warrnambool City Council, and I'll be chairing tonight's council meeting. I would like to formally welcome everyone watching this council meeting, whether you're here in the room with us tonight or live streamed, as the meeting is live streamed to allow for public viewing and transparency. If any technical problems interrupt the live streaming during this meeting, the meeting will be adjourned until the issues are rectified. The scheduled council meeting will be conducted in accordance with the council's governance rules, and any interruptions to the meeting or actions not in line with behaviour expectations will be dealt with in accordance with these rules. Councillors, can I ask you all to stand for the opening prayer and acknowledgement to the traditional owners? Almighty God, grant to this council wisdom, understanding and sincerity of purpose for the good governance of this city. Amen. I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands of which we stand this evening, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 2 on the agenda for tonight, apologies. Are there any apologies for this meeting?
Madam Mayor, we have one apology from Councillor Arnott.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have a mover that council accept the apology from Councillor Arnott? Councillor Taylor, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ziegler, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimously. Number 3, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, at item 3 on the agenda, we have a recommendation before us to confirm the minutes of the scheduled meeting of council held on the 2nd of May 2022. Are there any questions before I seek a motion on this? Thank you. Do I have a mover? Councillor Blaine. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pasbaliaris. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 4, conflicts of interest. If is declared a conflict of interest, must leave the meeting and remain outside the room while the matter is being considered or any vote is taken. Once the matter is resolved, the councillor will return to the meeting. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest this evening? Thank you. No, there are none. Agenda item 5, which is the mayoral presentation. I'd just like to acknowledge that on Friday the 27th of May, Warrnambool City Council hosted the opening event for Reconciliation Week, held on the Civic Green. It was this year's reconciliation theme across the nation was Be Brave and Make Change. The event was very well attended, probably twice as many as last year. It was a great day on the Civic Green, sun was out, so it brought out a lot of people, which was really great. We had a very special welcome to country and smoking ceremony, raised both the Aboriginal and the Australian flags. We had some wonderful cultural dancing by some of our local Aboriginal community members. There were musicians playing some original songs and entertainment for people, and we had words of support from a couple of speakers about the week of celebration ahead. So it was a really, really good event. The main message was really that education is the key for us all to learn about our country's Aboriginal peoples. The 2017 Uluru Statement from the Heart graciously invites all Australians to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. That's an invitation we should all accept. And I'd just like to congratulate the council staff in that appropriate area that put that together. It was really well done and well appreciated. So that's all for the mayoral presentation this week. So we're up to agenda item number 6, public question time. CEO, are there any public questions tonight?
Madam Mayor, there have been no questions received.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Councillors, we're now moving to the office reports section of the agenda. I would like to remind you of the speaking times allocated for each item during the meeting as outlined in our governance rules. The mover of a motion may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes to open the debate and then a further 2 minutes later to exercise the right of reply and to close the debate. Any other councillor, including the seconder, may speak for or against a motion of no more than 3 minutes. To assist councillors with time limits, you will hear a signal when you have reached the maximum time allowed. I would ask you to respect those time limits, please. Agenda item 7, reports. 7.1, instrument of appointment and authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act 1987, agenda page number 5. Directorate Department Executive Services. This purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement of the S11A Instrument of Appointment and Authorisation under the Planning and Environment Act 1987 to members of staff which reflect recent legislative changes within the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Are there any questions for this one before we start? Thank you. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Ziegler, what is your motion?
I would move that the officer's recommendation be the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Taylor, thank you. Councillor Ziegler, would you like to speak?
Basically, to explain the situation for folks that aren't familiar with this arrangement, the Chief Executive Officer has the delegated power to appoint the majority of authorised officers under the legislation. However, the appointment of authorised officers under the Planning and Environment Act cannot be delegated and are therefore required to be made by a resolution of Council. And that's the purpose of this particular motion. It's a statutory requirement which must be carried through.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor Shelley. The instrument of authorisation has been updated due to staff changes within the planning team and enables officers to have authorisation to enter sites, gather evidence and serve legal notices to carry out their roles within the legislated requirements. Thank you, Mayor Shelley.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? No? Thank you. Councillor Ziegler, would you like to close debate? Okay, thank you. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 7.2, public interest disclosure procedure. Agenda page number 7, Directorate Executive Services. The purpose of this report is to present proposed amendments to the public interest disclosure procedure. Are there any questions on this item before I seek a motion from anyone? No. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Blaine, what is your motion?
The Council adopt the public interest disclosure procedure as found at attachment 1.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Paspaliaris. Councillor Blaine, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is just an update to a council policy. At the time when this policy was last adopted, we didn't actually have a governance officer, and I actually think it's really important to have that separation from the directors to the manager of governance whenever we are dealing with public interest disclosures, so that they can be truly independent in the process of gathering information in the public interest. Yeah, I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Paspaliaris, would you like to speak?
Yes, I agree with what Councillor Blaine said. It's just important that the contact person goes to the manager the governance manager. So this is the person that I feel also is the best equipped to oversee the disclosure process. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other councillors like to speak to this? Thank you. Councillor Blaine, no further speakers. Would you like to
No,
close?
thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 7.3, Warrnambool City Council Asset Plan, financial year 2022 to 32 for 10 years. Agenda page number 9, Directorate City Infrastructure. The purpose of this report is to provide information about Council's asset plan for financial years 2022 to 32 in compliance with Section 92 of the Victorian Local Government Act 2020. The asset plan explains the current position of the Council's assets, the strategies for their management and their financial sustainability. Are there any questions before we move ahead with this? Okay, councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Ziegler, what is your motion?
I'd move that the council accepts the officer's recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Blaine, thank you. Councillor Ziegler, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Councillor Jelly. Yes. The development of an asset plan is a new requirement of Local Government Act 2020, with the Act outlining certain aspects which are particularly important. It contains information about the maintenance, renewal, acquisition, upgrading, disposal and decommissioning of our assets around our town, so that we have a good handle on what assets we have, the state of the asset and where they're going when they're finished with. So again, it's one of those statutory requirements, but it's a really good plan to have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blaine, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The asset management plan, I think, is a crucial plan for council, especially going through such a sustained period of growth we're seeing at the moment. Every new housing estate, at some stage, those assets will be gifted to council, and this plan will have to stay fluid in order to account for the extra assets that we're taking on. It's good to see in the shorter term that we can manage the assets that we've got, because it seems every asset does have a useful life and a life when it needs upgrades. But it does seem that in the next 10 to 13 years we will see funding will have to be increased for these assets in order to keep them in a level that's acceptable to the community. You've got to remember that these assets aren't just playgrounds in council buildings, but it's the roads, bridges, drainage, pathways, open space. So we just need to be, so I believe that we really need to be on the front foot here and start planning on what are we going to do, how are we going to manage our assets in the years to come? How are we actually going to fund these things? Is it something that we're in a rate-capped environment at the moment? Is it something that we're going to expect ratepayers to totally foot? Or is it really something that we'd have to be lobbying state government for in order to make sure that we've got the funds in order to properly service our communities? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would any other councillor like to speak to this? Councillor Paspaliaris.
Thank you, Mayor. This plan is obviously very important, and I do endorse it going out for public comment and feedback. The main concern I have about the plan is obviously, as Councillor Blaine has alluded to, the projected outcome beyond the plan itself. So the asset renewal backlog continues to exist around the acceptable value of 5% of asset-based value for the 10-year plan. But beyond that, in years 12 and 13 and further, they're what really worry me, where the backlog will potentially increase to an unacceptable value of 8 to 10% of asset-based value if the planned renewal funding levels are not increased. This, in addition to the fact that as time goes on, there will undoubtedly be some changing standards and increasing requirements for asset renewal due to technological advances, increased customer expectations and customer volume, and this can only lead to an increase in funds required to renew any given asset, so to ultimately create more of a financial burden to try and manage. I do appreciate the fact that this plan's approach is part of a continual improvement process, and as Councillor Blaine mentioned, it's a fluid document that will use community engagement and feedback to help sort of steer the plan going forward. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Jolly. The purpose of the plan is to improve the transparency around asset value and performance and improve information to the community on the type of assets under council management and articulate and communicate the challenges on service level, costs, risks and the consideration for decisions made. Significant council asset categories that have surprised me, amongst others, are 390 building structures, 61 bridges and culverts, and 350 kilometres of concrete and sealed pathways. That's a lot to manage. Thank you, Mayor Jolly.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Anyone else? Thank you. There being no other speakers wishing. Councillor Ziegler, would you like to close the debate?
Yeah, just I'd like to acknowledge the points made by all of my colleagues with regard to this, but also point out that Council is continually under pressure for asset maintenance and sustainability. Sustainability being the key word, particularly in the view of climate change over the next 10 to 20 years. We've got to be very conscious of how we manage our assets in that respect. And as Councillor Paspaliaris said, that there is, the possibilities of demographic change, but there's also the almost certain emerging technologies in practice that we have to be very conscious of. So it's, again, a very dynamic document. It's one that's fluid. We have to be prepared to change as change is required. Councillor Taylor's made the very good point that our asset volume is enormous, and while Warrnambool City is a relatively small community, the asset volume is mind-boggling at times.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ziegler. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 7.4, Tender Award 2022-015B, Jetty Flat Pavilion, agenda page number 14, Directorate City Infrastructure. This report provides information on the award of contract 2022-015B, Jetty Flat Pavilion redevelopment. Any questions before we seek a motion on this? Thank you. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Taylor, what is your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Jolly. I'd like to move the motion to award the contract 2022-015B Jetty Flat Pavilion redevelopment be awarded to Bolden Constructions for the tendered amount of $834,183, excluding GST, and authorise the CEO to sign, seal and vary the contract as required as per the officer's recommendation be accepted. Thank you, Mayor Jolly.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Taylor. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Paspaliaris. Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor Jolly. Yes, it gives me great pleasure to see the redevelopment of Jetty Flat has been funded by the various grant sources, primarily $500,000 from the for Sport and Recreation Victoria with the female-friendly facilities, and the Warrnambool CIty Council have contributed $393,000. I remember as a child riding my bicycle over the old pedestrian railway line overpass near the railway station from school down to Chetty Flat for football training with St Joseph's under 14. St John's under 14, and all we had to change in was a small tin shed. Many champion footballers and cricketers have begun their careers at the Chetty Flat Oval, and it is enormous to see this oval now where it is, and a new pavilion to be completed by the end of this year. Thank you, Mayor Shelley.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, and you must have been a good footballer then.
I wasn't one of the champions.
Thank you. Councillor Paspaliaris, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. I think that this is a really great project about to start. I think it is a sign of the times, though, that there were no submissions received with the tender advertising, and I think it was obviously important for council to reach out and see if there were some local companies that were able to partake in this project. There's also time constraints on the completion date as well, which are dependent on some of that state funding. So the timing has been really important and has been influential on the recommendation as well. But I'm happy to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor like to speak to it? Councillor Blaine.
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting project and builds on some of the work we did with the small infrastructure project last year as well, with the new fence around the oval as well. I do thank the user groups of Jetty Flat, because it would have been a huge task for them to be able to come up with the 55,000, and Cricket Victoria for supporting the project as well. It is really exciting to see this is another step forward for all our facilities being female friendly. And I really do hope that we can continue to do these kind of projects and make sure that all of our grounds are female friendly for all user groups. Like in a lot of sports, this is the female sports are some of the fastest growing sports, some of the fastest growing aspects of these sports now. And it's really important, especially as a leading regional city, that we support our female athletes the same as we support our men, in order to give them the facilities in order to achieve and succeed. So I think this is really exciting, and yeah, I hope it goes well.
Thank you, Councillor Blaine. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Akoich.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is exciting to see that Jetty Flat is having funding for development, because it's very essential, especially for day programs, those who are doing the program through the organizations in town. So it is very small at the moment, but if it is extended, that will be helpful and will help a lot of organizations that running the day programs for people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Ziegler.
Yeah, I'd just like to further acknowledge the contribution made by the Jetty Flat Reserve user groups. I think that's marvellous that they've raised as much money as that to contribute to the project. It certainly gives them an investment in practical terms into those facilities, make sure that it becomes an object of pride for them to look after it as well.
That's right. Thank you. I agree with you all. The upgrade of the project, female-friendly change rooms, or for everyone, of course, but there's quite a few areas around the town that, some of the female athletes, footballers, cricketers, whatever, don't have an appropriate change room, perhaps that they've always been for the male side. So it's great that these are being updated and the recognition of that for everyone, so that's great. Okay, there being no further speakers, Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak again before we close?
No, thank you, Mayor Jelly.
Thank you. Okay, I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Passed unanimously. Thank you. 7.5, Award of Contract 2022-019, Port of Warrnambool Dredging, agenda page number 16, Directorate City Infrastructure. This report provides information on the award of contract 2022-019, Port of Warrnambool Dredging. Are there any questions before we seek a motion from anyone? Thank you. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Blaine, what is your motion?
I move that Council award contract number 2022-19 Port of Warrnambool Dredging to Hall Contracting Pty Ltd for the tendered amount of $963,031.80 excluding GST. That the schedule of rates offered is accepted to undertake any works over and above the lump sum price if required, provided that additional works can be negotiated with the asset owner. That additional desired work be awarded under a provisional sum and approved under the contract, provided additional funding be sourced, and for authorise the CEO to sign, seal and vary the contract as required.
Thank you, Councillor Blaine. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Ziegler, thank you. Councillor Blaine, would you like to speak?
Yes, I'd just like to say it's really a sign of what we've just been through, especially over the last 12 months, in this period of hyperinflation, that we've actually seen that even though we were awarded $1 million worth of funding, that we've had to scale back the works by about 60%. Like this capital dredge is coming back from 35,000 to 20,000. And look, when I first found out about this at the briefing 2 weeks ago, I did think it was disappointing, but then I've thought more and more about it, going, well, you know, this is state funding. Hopefully we'll be able to source more in order to get the dredge that we actually need. But if we actually do nothing, nothing's going to change down there. We know that the harbour's being filled up with sand. We really need to do something about it, and this is our best shot. There is the hope too that we will find extra budget in order to get to our 35,000 cubic metres of sand. The other thing I found that was a bit interesting, because there was a whole heap of extra work that actually had to be done on this. The dispersal of the spoils also has changed its methodology as well. Instead of being a pipe floating out in the harbour, putting the spoils out further, it's actually going to be done on the beach now, and rainbowed out about 150 metres. Which a whole heap of work actually had to be done on that in order to make sure that it wasn't going to create any rips or create any safety issues. But that was just another really big change from where we first started with the dredging. So it is disappointing that we've had to work to the budget that we've actually got, but I am hopeful, and I do think that we will be able to source more dredge funding out of the state government before the end of this, before this work's complete, in order to be able to complete what we set out to do with the Harbour Reference Group. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Blaine. Councillor Ziegler.
Yes, the comments that Councillor Blaine has made are very relevant, obviously, and I'd like to just signal the fact that this is a first stage in what's got to be, over a period of time, a regular occurrence for our harbour, and sometimes I find it a little bit galling. We have to find and fight for the funding for these kind of projects that are essential for this particular township and essential for the well-being of our magnificent harbour. Having said that, I will acknowledge Councillor Blaine's comment that at least we've got a start to it, and it's going to start to happen. We'll just have to find the extra money to make sure that we try and get to the 35,000 cubic metres that we originally hoped to be able to dredge. And further to that, the future of the dredge project into the years to come.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this? Councillor Taylor, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Shelley. I acknowledge Councillor Blaine and Councillor Ziegler's comments about the dredging. The depositing of the dredging further north along the beach isn't my first choice. I'd rather see the sand deposited somewhere else, or mainly between Worm Bay and the pavilion. But I appreciate the Victorian Fisheries Authority on their grant of $1 million. So I just hope it all goes well. Thank you, Mayor Charlie.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Anyone else like to speak? Thank you. There being no further speakers, Councillor Blaine, would you like to close debate?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It's important to remember too that when it comes to our harbour, we are the major advocacy body. It's a state asset and it needs state funding. It's not our asset. And it is important too, as Councillor Ziegler pointed out, maintenance dredging is going to be critical in order to keep this facility safe and usable. And it shouldn't be done by time. It needs to be done by the movement of the sand in order to ensure that it's safe all the time. When it comes to the spoils, as Councillor Taylor pointed out as well, it's also key that we have the DELP, the Department of Environment, on board with what we're doing with the spoils, because they're the key in order to be able to continue to dredge and look after this facility. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, raise your hand. Thank you. All unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 7.6, 2022-030, Register of Contractors Supporting Building Maintenance and Construction Works 2022. Agenda page number 19, Directorate City Infrastructure. The purpose of this report is to award deeds under tender number 2022-030, Register of Contractors Supporting Building Maintenance and Construction Works. Are there any questions about this item? Thank you. Councillors, do I have a motion for this item? Councillor Taylor, what's your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Shelley. Yes, I'd like to move that the motion for tender submissions, Register of Contractors, is as per officer's recommendation be accepted. Thank you, Mayor Shelley.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the item? Councillor Paspaliaris. Thank you. Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor Shelley. Yes, the purpose of this report is to create a register of contractors supporting minor building construction and maintenance for a period of 3 years, with an optional year extending to June 2026. Thank you, Mayor Shelley.
Thank you. Councillor Paspaliaris.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to say that obviously this type of register is really important for council to draw on through, I guess, regular contractors, so council can be confident that the people that they're using for this type of work, is quality, and these people are proving themselves time and time again. So that will build council's confidence with this type of register. That's also been used to assess this register of contractors as well. So I would support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paspaliaris. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? Councillor Blaine?
Yes, I'd like to fully endorse what Councillor Taylor and Councillor Paspaliaris have said. I think it's important too for this register to be adopted publicly in the sake of transparency, to see who was put in and who's put in and who will be called on to do minor works for council. It's important to note too that each contractor will have less than $250,000 per annum spent on them. Anything over the $400,000 will have to still come through council, but it's key in order to get those urgent minor works done, that we do have a registrar, and because it's public funding, public money, it's coming out of our budget. I think it's also key too that everyone can see who it is, and I would hope that the 5 tenderers, there were 5 tenderers who'll provide extra information. Hopefully they get that through so they can be included on the panel as well.
Thank you, Councillor Blaine. Anyone else like to speak to this? Thank you. There being no other further speakers, Councillor Taylor, would you like to close the debate?
No, thank you, Mayor Shelley.
Okay, we'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Council carried unanimously. Thank you. We've got agenda item 7.17, Advisory Committee Reports, agenda page number 22, Directorate Executive Services. This report contains the record of one advisory committee meeting. Any questions about this before we seek a motion? Thank you, councillors. Do I have a motion? Councillor Ziegler, what is your motion?
I move that the officer's recommendation be received.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Paspaliaris, thank you. Councillor Ziegler, would you like to speak?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Paspaliaris, would you like to speak? Would anyone else like to speak to this at all? Okay. So Councillor Ziegler to close at all? Okay. Thank you. We'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 7.8, informal meetings of council reports. Agenda page number 23, Directorate Executive Services. The purpose of this report is to provide council with copies of informal meetings of council, previously known as Assembly of Council records, as previously required under section 80A2 of the Local Government Act 1989. Are there any questions in regard to this? Anyone? No? Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Paspaliaris, what is your motion?
That the record of the informal meetings of council held on the 9th, 11th, 16th, 23rd and 30th of May 2022 be received.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Blaine. Thank you. Councillor Paspaliaris, would you like to speak?
Actually, I'd just like to say that on the Assembly of Councillors records, I am noted as arriving late quite a few times. So I just wanted to publicly state that that's due to work commitments that can be rather unpredictable, not just my general lack of punctuality.
Thank you. No, we all understand that. Councillor Blaine, would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to? Thank you. Councillor Paspaliaris, anything further? Thank you. There being no further speakers, I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. 7.9, agenda item, Mayoral and Chief Executive Officer Council Activities Summary Report, agenda page number 24, Directorate Executive Services. This report summarises the Mayoral and Chief Executive Officer Council activities since the last ordinary meeting, which particularly relate to key social, economic and environmental issues of direct relevance to the Warrnambool community. Are there any questions about this, councillors? Thank you. Do I have a councillor to move the motion? Councillor Blaine, thank you. What is your motion?
That the Mayor and Chief Executive Officer Council Activities Summary Report be received.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Ziegler, thank you. Councillor Blaine, would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Councillor Ziegler, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out the very heartening event on the 17th of May, the Ida Hobbit Day flag raising ceremony. It was really fantastic to see how many folks turned up for that and how well received it was. It was just so heartening. I think the numbers probably tripled on the previous year. It was great to see.
Yep. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this? Thank you. And I'd second what Councillor Ziegler has said. And again, another great event organised by our own staff that encompassed the community. So that was really good. Councillor Blaine, would you like to say anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you. We'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, that ends those ones. Agenda item 8, notice of motion. There's no notice of motions being received today. General business. Agenda item 9, only items of minor or routine nature can be raised in general business. And I retain the right to reject items in accordance with clause 29(2) of the governance rules. I remind councillors that you will have a maximum of 2 minutes to speak and officers will be provided with an opportunity. Are there any items of general business, councillors? Thank you. Okay, there's none there. Are there any, CEO, are there any items, notices of items of urgent business? Sorry.
None raised, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, well that brings us to the conclusion of the meeting, the close of meeting at 6:25 p.m. Thank you all.